Welcome, attendees. We're going to give just a couple of minutes for people to kind of file in virtually. I'm Anna Brown from Katie Budget Books. I'm the events coordinator and the store manager now, which is new. But I have been running our events program for about a decade now, and I am really excited about this event. I'm really excited about all of our events, but I'm personally really excited about this one. We are using Zoom webinar, so you can see and hear us, but we can't see and hear you. There is a Q&A box. We have disabled the chat function, but you can ask any questions of the authors at any point in the Q&A box. And then when we get towards the end, I will be referring to that to pull questions for the authors. It will be on the same panel. If you've never used webinar before, the Q&A box is on the same control panel on a computer. It's on the bottom of the screen on your phone, wherever the rest of your options come up. So that's kind of all the techie stuff. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is our unrequired reading virtual panel. I am personally really excited about this because I know not all of you are from our part of the country, but I think it's been a problem in schools all over the country recently, where there has been kind of a string of book challenges. And there's a reason that libraries, particularly in schools, have challenge processes in place. But what's been a little terrifying about the recent challenges is that it seems to be trying to keep books about specific topics out of the hands of teens. And sex and sexuality, racism and prejudice of various kinds, and then their own rights to themselves, right? So we've put together this panel of authors who've written books that touch on those subjects, but are also just enjoyable reads. In the hopes that maybe independent bookstores highlighting some of those titles that teachers are a little afraid to be recommending to their students in the current environment will make sure you guys still have access to that kind of literature, which is so important. At Katie Budget Books, we absolutely believe that literature can change the world, and we think it does it best when young readers are able to see not only themselves reflected in books, regardless of their personal identities, but also people that don't look like them, don't talk like them, don't have the same experiences as them, because it gives them a safe space to be exposed to a bunch of different things and then start asking questions of their trusted adults where they feel safe. So we are very proud to be bringing you these authors tonight. I am going to switch the view so you can see all of them. I'm going to briefly introduce the whole panel so you know who all is here. And how do I get back to where you can see everybody? And then I'm going to do more specific introductions of each of the authors. There it is. And they're each going to tell you a little bit about their books before we start the Q&A portion. So today we have Myra and Marie Marquart. We have Senora Reyes, Jen Ferguson, Carrie Mccrosson, and Estelle Lohr. And we are supposed to have Juliana Goodman. I am hoping she is just running a little late, but she may be unable to join us this evening. I'm going to tell you about her book if she doesn't show up, because it is also incredible and I'm so excited about it. So we're going to start. I'm going to do the bios for Myra and Marie because they have written a book together. So I know it's going to seem weird. I'm doing them at the same time. But they have co-written Does My Body Offend You, which is fabulous. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, Myra Cuevas is author of the teen novels Does My Body Offend You and Salty Bittersweet, recently named a book all young Georgians should read. Her short story Resilient was published as part of the anthology Foreshadow. Myra is an award-winning producer for CNN and co-founder of the Latinx Kidlit Book Festival. She keeps her sanity by practicing Buddhist meditation. She lives in Atlanta with her husband, her two stepsons, their fluffy cat, and a very loud chihuahua. Aren't all chihuahuas very loud? Marie Marquart is the author of YA novels Does My Body Offend You, with Myra Cuevas, Dream Things True, The Radius of Us, and Flight Season. Her books have earned many awards and commendations, including being shortlisted for several state book awards. Marie also has published articles and co-authored 2 nonfiction books about Latin American immigration to the US South, and has been interviewed about her research, writing, and advocacy on NPR, Public Radio International, and BBC America, among many other media outlets. She lives in a busy household in Decatur with her spouse, 4 kids, several chickens, a dog, and a bearded dragon. And you can connect with her on Instagram and at her website. So Myra and Marie, will you tell us a little bit about Does My Body Offend You?
Yes,
we'd love to.
We'd love to. So Does My Body, and I'm not sure about the setup because we're still kind of seeing all the authors on the side. I'm not sure if that's the same view on your end and on the audience's end, but we'll keep going. So does my body offend you? It's our friend of ours called it a feminist unicorn. It's this story of it's told from two points of view. So Milena, my character, after Hurricane Maria, she comes to live in Florida and she goes to school. She gets a bad sunburn. She goes to school without a bra, and she's suspended as a result. And in the process, she meets Ruby, who is Marie's character. And then you can talk a little bit about Ruby.
Yeah, so Ruby's also sort of come to Florida recently. She's from Seattle, Washington. She considers herself sort of a feminist warrior, and she takes on this sort of project of bringing Milena into this undertaking that they're going to challenge the dress code, and they're going to start a feminist revolution at their school. And basically, the revolution fails miserably. Yeah. And in the process, they learn a whole lot about what it means to build friendships across difference, about allyship, about what it is to be an accomplice, and about when to step forward and really claim your voice, and when to step back and become a careful listener and a good partner and ally.
And in terms of telling a story about social justice for teens, we really wanted to explore what happens after the protest, right? After everybody has taken the signs home and the chants have died down and the attention has died down, how do we make meaningful change happen in a realistic, practical way? And we know that takes a lot of time. So we just, Marie and I both have a lot of experience in the community activism space. I'm also a journalist. So we just wanted to paint this realistic picture in a very entertaining and fun way, because there's a bra burning scene, and who doesn't love a good bra burning scene?
I absolutely love a good bra burning scene. I feel like there are not enough.
Yes, and I hope the creative writing students in Jen's classroom are nodding their heads along.
Okay, so next is Jen Ferguson. She is Métis on her father's side and Canadian settler on her mother's side, an activist, a feminist, an auntie, and an accomplice armed with a PhD. She believes writing, teaching, and beating are political acts. She is represented by Patricia Nelson. She lives on Gabrielina Tongva, I should have asked about how to pronounce that also, territory, and teaches fiction writing at Loyola Marymount University. You can reach her on Twitter and through her contact page. And can you tell us a little bit about the Summer of Bitter and Sweet?
Of course. So the Summer of Bitter and Sweet is about an 18-year-old Métis teen named Lou. And Lou is having a tumultuous summer. I would say that everything that could possibly go wrong or happen in Lou's life happens during this summer. She is working at her family's struggling ice cream shack business with her recently ex-boyfriend, her best friend who's having a mental health crisis of her own, and her former best friend, King, who has returned to town mysteriously after a 3-year absence. And then on top of all of that, Lou gets a letter from her white biological father, who's been in prison her whole life, and he is being released early, and he wants to have a relationship with her. And she does not want that. So it's a summer of Lou figuring out her sexuality, Lou mending friendships with someone that she had lied to, and Lou figuring out how to deal with this very monstrous figure, her biological father.
Is so good. Like most of these books, it deals with some pretty heavy topics, so it can sound like it's going to be a heavy read, but still manages to just be super fun at the same time, because it really is just about a teenager like figuring out who she is and what she wants, and it's incredible. Thank you. Okay, so next is Estelle Lohr, is the author of 10 published and or forthcoming picture books and young adult novels, including acclaimed novel This Raging Light and Disney's City of Villains trilogy. She holds an MFA in writing for children and young adults from Vermont College of Fine Arts and a BA in theater arts from New Mexico State University. She lives in Taos, the best place on earth. That is what's in her bio. With her family, and her work has been translated into more than 15 languages around the world. Estelle, can you tell us a little bit about Practice Girl?
Yes, I would love to. I hope I can get this out in an articulate manner, because I've been trying to think how to talk about this book. It is about Jo Beckett. She is 17 and has recently lost her father and has been helping out with the wrestling team in the high school. Her father was a most beloved wrestling coach. And as the book opens, she is on her third sexual relationship within the wrestling team over a period of 2 years. And she is basically one of those people, like I was, who is in love with love. She falls in love so easily. She thinks every guy is going to be her like one true love. And this guy who she's just slept with says, you know, I think we better stop this before it gets awkward. And then cut to a party at his house where she's sort of feeling isolated and alone. And she's crouched down and she overhears him referring to her as a practice girl, meaning a girl who is good enough to have sex with, but not good enough to actually bring home or legitimize in terms of the relationship at all. And so then she has to backtrack and look at all the relationships she's had, and she realizes they have all been using her in that way, and that it's something that the entire wrestling team knows about. And so, of course, that's incredibly heartbreaking for her. And so that's how she begins to look at her relationship to romance, to sex, to other girls, to being one of the guys and what that means. And she also joins the wrestling team and decides that she is going to beat them on their own territory. So while this does fall into a gender binary and is very traditional in some ways, I hope that the exploration of sex and romance is honest and, you know, deep.
I loved it. It was one of those books that I thought I really wish teen me got to have. So I'm really grateful that teens today get to have it, because teen me didn't, but that's okay. I still got to read it and enjoy it today. And
Me too. That's how I feel too. Yeah.
Okay, next is Carrie Mccrosson. She's an author and actor whose work has appeared in the New Yorker's Daily Shouts, The Belladonna, and Funny or Die. Her plays have been performed all over the US and abroad. With her husband, Ian McWethy, she has written several feature films for Lifetime TV and 2 YA novels. Margo Marx Takes It Down and Margo Marx for the Win, which I did not know there was going to be a second one, and I maybe squealed a little bit when I saw that it was coming when I was preparing for this event. It's coming this fall. Carrie is a veteran of the theater, where she performed improv and sketch comedy until the pandemic. So can you tell us a little bit about Margo Marx?
Yes, I was going to read something, and then everyone else spoke off the cuff so eloquently, and I'm like, should I speak off the cuff? I don't think it will go well, but we can try. So this Margo Marx is a 17-year-old high school junior. We're in her head. She's kind of sardonic and funny, and her job is that in order to save money for Stanford, her dream college, she comes from a like middle class background, and her parents do not have savings for her. So she is working cleaning up people's internet filth for money. So she'll do this for like her fellow classmates, for her teachers, sometimes for other adults. And she'll erase an embarrassing tweet, a screenshot of a conversation that you maybe shouldn't have had, something that a problematic Halloween costume that, it's not going to look great when you run for office, that kind of thing. That's kind of the setup. But what happens in the book is that she is hired by it starts with one young woman at her school who finds her image up on a revenge porn site. And it turns out that all of the boys in school seem to know about this. Someone is collecting images of girls at the high school, nudes, and putting them all in one place online. And Margo gets really pissed off and is really angry. And she makes it her personal mission to bring justice, vengeance, and take down this site and the boys who built it. And, you know, there's like, you know, some romance in there too. And it is like a comedy too, kind of. But it largely deals with Margo's journey of personal growth as she learns to maybe not judge people so harshly, and to and what it means to balance her work and her life. Things I'm still working on. And also it just deals with consent and online, what that looks like online. And yeah, it wasn't as eloquent. I should have read it, but that's it.
It's really good. I loved it. And then last but not least is Senora Reyes. They are a queer second-generation immigrant who attended a Catholic high school. They write fiction full of queer and Latinx characters in a variety of genres. Senora is also the creator and host of #QPOC Chat. I just realized how lame I sound saying hashtag out loud. A monthly community building Twitter chat for queer writers of color. They currently live in Arizona in a multi-generational family home with a small pack of dogs who run the place. Senora, can you tell us a little bit about the Lesbianis Guide to Catholic School?
Yes, I can. Excuse me. Can you hear me? Okay, my thing's not showing up on the big screen for some reason, but everyone else's was.
It is for us.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. That's all that matters. Okay, so the Lesbianas Guide to Catholic School follows 16-year-old Yamilet Flores, who volunteers to go to Catholic school with her brother after her brother's been getting into too many fights and a lot of trouble at their old school. So his mom sends him to Catholic school and she says, let me go with him so I can take care of him, keep an eye out on him, and make sure he doesn't get into any more trouble. But secretly, she has ulterior motives because she really wants to go to Catholic school because she just got outed and rejected by her ex-best friend and crush at the old school. So she's looking for a fresh start of her own. And when she goes to Catholic school, she vows not to fall in love ever again. And that proves complicated when the only openly queer girl at their new school is immediately so charming and sweet and kind and so cute. And she immediately fails her plan to not fall in love. Yeah.
I adored, I mean, I feel like I said that about every book, but I really did. I loved reading for this panel so much. And I loved about yours that it was so much about her kind of figuring out herself. That obviously there's, and I think this is true to some extent of all of these books, that there's all this external stuff going on, but that really the heart of it is a teenager figuring out where they belong in the world and what they're comfortable with in their own boundaries. And I love that so much. I do want to just briefly touch on Juliana's book because it doesn't look like she is going to be able to join us today, but it's fabulous. And so I want to talk about it for just a minute since she's not here to tell y'all. Juliana Goodman wrote the last Black Girls Left Standing. It is a Black Lives Matter book. The main character's older sister was shot by an off-duty police officer, but she was on his property. And so the story is that she was there trying to rob the place. But the sister absolutely does not believe that. She doesn't believe her older sister Katia was capable of doing that or living that kind of life. And so it's very much a journey of her trying to make everyone else remember Katia's name and figure out what really happened, try to track down Katia's boyfriend who was there that night but disappeared, to get him to go to the police and tell them what really happened. But it's again really about what goes on with her through this process, how she realizes that she's kind of stopped living her own life because she's made it all about kind of finding a way to avenge her sister while also dealing with these heavy topics, and it deals with it gorgeously. It's a beautiful book, but then it's really still about, like, at some point you have to figure out where you belong and where you want to go forward and what you're going to do with your life to carry this message beyond just this one thing. So it's not coming out until June 28th, but we have them on order. Attendees, you can pre-order them from the store or wherever your favorite indie bookstore is. But I did just want to make sure that book got talked about since Juliana was supposed to be here tonight. And now I'm going to switch the view back so that we can see everybody, I think. Let's see if it works this time. Yes, it appears to. So that we can do some questions for the whole group to answer. And the first thing I'm curious about, because as someone in the industry, I know that you guys didn't write your books yesterday and get them published this year, right? Like this has been a long process. So the environment when you started writing your books was probably not the environment that you were looking at when the books got published. This recent string of challenges around particular topics was probably not going on when you were working on these books. So I guess first, like, how did you decide which topics to write about? Like, all of your books feature some pretty heavy stuff. Did the book come to you out of that, about wanting to address the topics that your book deals with, or did it start somewhere else and just happen to include that? And let's maybe start with Estelle first this time.
Oh, okay. Well, unfortunately, it didn't come out of the clear blue sky. I mean, this is something that I didn't experience exactly as Joe did, but I definitely felt like there was a huge double standard when I was coming up, and that there was no place to go to really explore sexuality or what it was like to be in that sort of arena. I actually came to think of it as an arena. So wrestling kind of came out of that, but like it does feel like this, you know, like it's very difficult, and there are landmines everywhere. And so I just, when I was thinking of what I wanted to write next, that's what sort of came up for me, was like, how can I make this so that it's interesting to read and fun to read, but carries the weight of really looking at that.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Carrie?
Yeah, well, so I wrote Margo Marx with my husband, who's not here tonight. He is we had the idea for this character. We kind of liked the idea of like a female detective, like with a humorous voice. But then he read, this was, like you said, this was now years ago, American Girls, and I brought it, Social Media and the Secret Lives of Teenagers, which is a nonfiction book by Nancy Jo Sales. And he was horrified. He was like, you wouldn't believe what's happening online. It, you know, there's just like a lot of horror stories about bullying and revenge pornography and everything else. And it made us think like there was a really natural tie-in to our character there, and it gave her some stakes and a mission that was something that we could really investigate. And I think it's the sharing of nudes, and is something that's happening, and the last thing that we want to do is like shame the people who choose to do that. But there is, I think, like, I don't think that there is enough of a dialogue about that happening, and what consent looks like online. And I don't think there's enough dialogue happening about what consent looks like in real life either. So this was a great way for us to take a character that we really wanted to like get in her head, and then dive into something that we thought we could not solve, but at least think about in a different way. And it's, like you said, the landscape has changed. I mean, I don't know how long it's been, like maybe 4 years since we like started with the initial idea. And I keep reading articles and like sending my husband articles and being like, it's still topical. Like these things keep happening, like stories keep happening, like in politics. You know, our second book touches on politics, and like, you know, things, the Katie Hill thing happened after we were working on it, believe it or not, had the idea for it. And like it just remains. And happily, they did just, with the violence against, they did add an amendment to the Violence Against Women Act that I think might establish a federal law against non-consensual photography, but it's just such a long road as we play catch up in the justice system, trying to like figure out how to stop this and enforce this and just so I hope the book doesn't remain topical for that long. I hope it has an expiration date, but yeah.
Jen?
So I set out to write a cute summer romance between two BIPOC teens. And I was like, Jen, write something light and fluffy and like let these teens like live their life. And I got to the end of the first chapter and I had written myself into a terrible, terrible, like realistic plot problem. So when people tell me that the summer of bitter and sweet is topical, I mostly look at them and sort of say, like, I was writing this in the summer of 2019. That's when I started writing it. But the issue that I'm writing about, so like racism and violence, particularly towards Indigenous women and girls, there's like an ongoing human rights crisis in Canada and in the US, but we seem to imagine that border between our countries as like stopping certain things. So like over the course of the past 30 years, there have been at least 4,000, but probably closer to 7,000 or 9,000 Indigenous women and girls who have been murdered or gone missing. So writing about how the Canadian prairies are hostile towards Indigenous women and girls isn't topical. It's just realism. And writing about queer people discovering their identity or figuring out like how they identify on sort of like the alphabet soup list of queerdom. Again, it's just sort of something that happens. And in the Canadian prairies, where gay is still about as far as they get and it's a slur, you're not going to get further down that list of letters. But also certain letters fall off that list really quickly. And asexual spectrum folks tend to get ignored by the mainstream talk about queerness and transness, so that again, writing this book, it's not so much topical as just realism.
Senora?
Sorry. Yeah, so I'm so sorry. The question was like, how did we come about, like, okay, I remember the question now. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I just have to like repeat it to myself. But yeah, so when I started writing the Lesbianis Guide to Catholic School, it was for National Novel Writing Month. And I decided like on October 20th or something like that I was gonna write my first book, and I was gonna do it on November 1st. And that was when I was gonna start writing it. And all my ideas were like fantasy and speculative and like sci-fi and all that. But I decided I was gonna write a whole book in 30 days. And I was like, I don't have time to world build. This is like a couple weeks away. This is like a week away. So I have to write something that I know personally, something that I know intimately. And I ended up with the Lesbianas Guide to Catholic School by accident because I thought it would be easy, and it was not. It was so like, it was really cathartic, but it was a struggle to like, I had a lot of things to process while I was writing that book. And it was therapeutic and cathartic, but it definitely was not what I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be like an easy, let's just write something I know and it'll be super simple and I'll be able to finish it in 30 days and it'll be great. I did finish it in time, but yeah, it was definitely not meant to be as I guess I don't want to say like as much trauma, but there's like some heavy topics that go into that book, like really heavy topics like racism, obviously like homophobia and immigration, mental health. There's a bunch of things that get touched on in that book that I wasn't planning on touching on in the first draft, and then they just kind of happened. So yeah, it was just kind of me processing my stuff without realizing that that's what I needed to do.
Okay. And Myra and Marie? Oh, you're muted.
I do want to address the two parts of your question because you did touch, I believe part of the question was talking about like censorship and book banning. And I think we can view censorship and book banning as this like one thing. I believe like it's a spectrum, and we've seen that recently, right? So there's like the really loud people who are going to the school board meetings and like are challenging book publicly and are on social media. And then what we've seen recently is the very, very quiet, I'm just going to pull your book from the shelf and I'm not going to tell anyone. And I'm going to put it, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to put it here behind the desk and I'm just going to block access or decide who gets to read your book. So, I was listening earlier this week to a 2015 Meg Medina talk about book censorship, and unfortunately, not much has changed since 2015. Other than now, it's just the quiet part of this is kind of being outed a little bit. So I think we all need to be vigilant about that and have awareness if that's going on. Regarding, your part of the question about when we started writing the book, has anything changed? One of the reasons that Marie and I wanted to tackle feminism in a young adult book is that, in my experience, a lot of the books that with feminism, and especially in the young adult space, and dress codes were written from a white gaze. They're written solely from a white point of view. They do not address intersectionality, and they don't answer the question of how these systems and institutions unequally target people of color and members of marginalized communities, right? And how they're unfairly targeting, girls of color, members of LGBTQIA+ community, for ridiculous things. And not only that, they're perpetuating rape culture. They're victimizing people. They're creating all kinds of traumas. I recently spoke to somebody who is in their 50s and they're still carrying trauma from a dress code incident when they were in the 7th grade over the size of their boobs, because apparently their boobs were too big for the 7th grade. So now this is an adult who has a little bit of a hunchback because she internalized that her body wasn't right, or there was something wrong with her, and that she needed to do something about it. And it's basically taken her a lifetime of therapy to work through that. So, and our book touches on the topics of dress code, but this is the policing of girls and women's body is such a much bigger topic. And I don't want to get political, but now we're seeing it with this whole, dumpster fire, Roe versus Wade. Like, it just runs across the gamut in our society.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question, because we do write, it takes a long time for books to come out. And, when Maida first came to me, she and I have been critique partners for a very long time and working together. But when she first came to me and said, hey, how about we write a book together? And we were kind of toying around with ideas, and she threw out this idea of starting with the dress code violation and kind of writing a book about coming together for a protest. It was a time when I felt like, so I have 4 kids, and 3 of them are daughters. And I felt like my kids and I were taken to the streets every other week for some reason or another, and, it started with the Women's March, and it just kept going and going and going. And I was kind of observing just the utter devastation of, when you have this moment where you're gathered with literally millions of people across the world, and you're like, okay, this is it. We're going to change the world with our action, and then you wake up the next morning and nothing's changed. That was hard for me as a woman, as a feminist, and as a parent, of these kind of bright-eyed, optimistic children. And so I was really excited about writing a story that just kind of worked through for ourselves and kind of from the perspective of young women, what that journey is like. And of course did it from multiple points of view that helped us especially to think about what it means to be an accomplice and to be an ally, and how to do that well, because that is a really hard thing to do. I will say also, when you're writing a book, I know those of you who write all know this, surprises come up. You've got we plot, so we plot really carefully. So we had our plot, we're ready to go. And there's a really pivotal scene in the book that I think is crucially important to the story. And I was writing it while listening to the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And this feels like 100 years ago, right? But it wasn't 100 years ago. And it continues to be extraordinarily relevant to us. And something came into the story that I hadn't anticipated, and Maida hadn't either. And it was important, and it mattered. And it was driven by the circumstances in which we were living at that time, that of course continue to be, unfortunately, evergreen for us as women who are living in our bodies and trying really hard to fend off other people's attempts to control them.
And because I know there's a lot of writers who are listening in Jen's class in LA, I would say just write something that you are super passionate about. Don't worry whether it's going to be trendy or whether it's going to be on point or whether it's still going to matter in the 3, 4, 5, 6 years that it takes to publish your book. On average is about 3 years. Just write what you're super passionate about, because that will carry you through in that time.
And Myra, you kind of touched on the term I've heard used for it as soft censorship, which is the thing that I've been hearing a lot about recently, that because not all these books are going to get that big public challenge, but there are kinds of books that are just not getting bought for library shelves for schools because they're afraid that that reaction is coming. And I don't know that this is happening everywhere, but I know some of the parents in our local school board meeting went through a phase where they were calling for like legal actions against librarians for having put certain books in the library. And so with those kinds of things in the air, you can see the human tendency to be like, well, maybe we just won't carry any books new that might lead to more of that. And so as things have been going this way with y'all's books coming out new in the world, and Myra, this is kind of the question, part of the question you answered already, I think, but how did it feel to have books on topics that are being largely challenged coming out in the middle of this? I mean, were you concerned at all about what that was going to mean for your launch? Has it changed how you've been talking about your books at all? Like, how does that affect you guys as creators of content like this? And I know that's a real easy question, so everyone wants to be put on the spot for that one.
I'm happy since I started that. Since I threw in the first fireball for that one, I can tackle it first. It upsets me a little bit when people say, oh, you want to get your book banned because the sales will go through the roof and, your book will do great. Well, let me tell you, that is not the case. Most books do not get banned or censored or put away or not bought, with a flash on Twitter and Ted Cruz basically holding the cover in the middle of the hearing. Those are very few and far in between. Most of the books that are, censored or banned in some way are just quietly pulled from the shelves or not purchased and not included in classrooms and lists. Authors are not invited to speak in schools, and we just basically get pushed out completely of the conversation, and we're told you don't have a seat at the table anymore. Unfortunately, this ends up affecting a lot of kids who need those books because they don't see themselves in the regular curriculum books. They don't see themselves in The Great Gatsby or in the pick any other book written by a white guy 100 years ago, you know? So like, it's a serious issue, because then you're telling these kids, especially kids from already marginalized communities, that their experiences don't matter, that that, you know, their lives don't need to be validated on the page, that the voice from their communities, it's not important. So it does create, you know, it's the challenges and the issues that they create are just bigger than we can possibly understand. And it is one of the reasons why, you know, myself, along with Alex Villasanta and May Williams, we created the Latinx Kid Lit Book Festival, because we wanted a way to amplify voices within our community and go directly into classrooms in a way that was non-threatening and that it aligned with curriculum, so that we can at least, you know, help these kids see themselves in stories.
I'll say something really quickly. Oh, sorry. I don't want to cut you off, Marie.
No, please go ahead. Yeah.
This is just a quick thought. I didn't think too much about censorship when we were writing this. I wasn't really concerned if people didn't want to, if people were going to censor our book, then obviously I'm like, here's what I'll say. It always surprises me when they say something isn't appropriate for high schoolers, because I'm like, they're living it. Like, fine, like you can pretend that you don't want them to read about it, but like it's happening in their school, it's happening in it's happening to their friends, it's maybe happening to them. So when you say you don't want them to read about it, I'm like, okay, well, why do you not want something that feels current and present to be something that that they can then just have? I don't know. That's my thought. There's nothing, if anything, we soften what actually happens to young women whose pictures are spread in this way. If anything, we've written a palatable version of it. And so, yeah, it didn't really cross our minds to change our content based on it, or to, it's just not something we thought about. It was just based on the story we wanted to tell.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm a high school teacher, part-time. I have taught everything from 6th grade all the way through seniors, and I mostly work with juniors and seniors now, and I've not let go of it because I like to witness the experiences that they're having. And if you are a good teacher, you become a person that students come to, and they cry in your office and they tell you things. And so I can attest to the fact that all of these topics are things that students are confused about how to deal with and are grappling with. You know, the queer community is becoming more prevalent and more having more of a presence in my school. Personally, I work at a charter school where a lot of that community comes to get away from the public schools, because most of our kids have been bullied, so that's why they're with us. And so I just want to say that all of these books seem like things that I would want to have in the school. And I do get a little bit defensive when I hear, I know that, you know, New Mexico is different than Texas, and there are all kinds of things going on. But I do get a little defensive when I hear teachers being attacked for various reasons, whether they're trying to push an agenda or whatever it is that people think teachers are doing. We're just trying to navigate the space between parents and kids and all kinds of things. And I've personally given books to students that I've been like, ooh, I don't know if this is going to be okay with their family, but I know they need this book right now, you know. And so when I was thinking about writing Practice Girl, it was like, what book would I have wanted for someone to tell me the truth when I'm a kid who loves love? You know, if I'm one of the students who's like swooning all the time, well, how do you navigate the space between your swoon and how you how you have boundaries around your sexuality and protect yourself and those sorts of things. So I just wanted to say that teachers are really trying. That's all. We're trying, and we're trying to figure out what the boundaries are. How can we be ethically minded? And by the way, I have had conversations with kids who are like, we just don't want to talk about sex at school or any of that stuff. So I think it is like knowing you have this book, this is right for this person at this time, and having access to those books is so important.
Thank you.
Rant over.
Jen?
So no, I wasn't thinking about censorship when I was writing. I try not to let those voices in, because what I'm doing and what I do in my life and what I do in my teaching is I try to be as honest and truthful as possible. And I also try to be as nuanced as possible about everything. So if you're going to do that, you're going to end up on someone's list that you talked to really about a subject. I haven't seen any, like, my book came out a week ago. So I haven't really seen a lot of censorship or soft censorship, but what I have seen before the book was published was something particularly insidious that is like next to the conversation of soft censorship. And that was reactions from early readers who were weaponizing representation against marginalized authors. So for example, a lot of early reviewers who had the arc of my book didn't like the bisexual representation in my book because the bisexual character was both bisexual and a teenager who made mistakes, right? So this character kisses two other people at a party while in a long distance relationship with someone else, and then tells her partner immediately what she did. And so reviewers are saying, like, that's bad bisexual representation, and we will call it bad bisexual representation, and then start that process of censorship because from their perspective, a character who makes mistakes must be bad representation, right? So like, that's the kind of thing that I started to see, the so-called woke weaponizing representation against marginalized authors. And that's the same kind of thing that will like end up talking about how you shouldn't give this book to teens because it's not going to show you the good way to be a bisexual if they're still willing to like be handing out a book about bisexuality.
Senora?
Yeah, so when I wrote this book, The Lesbianis Guide to Catholic School, I had no idea how it was going to be received. I had no idea what the market was like. I didn't know about book banning or anything like that. And I really couldn't have predicted what ended up happening, both positive and negative. So like, I don't know if a lot of you saw this on Twitter, but so my book came out yesterday. And I posted about it on Twitter. And I think this just goes to show like what these conversations and these like legislations are doing to people. They're emboldening people, because when I made my Twitter like book birthday post, like my book comes out today, it's called The Lesbianis Guide to Catholic School. It's a love story to like the queer kids and the kids who never felt like they could fit in and all of that. And it blew up on right-wing Twitter. And half my comments were people calling me a pedophile, calling me a groomer, telling me that I'm a horrible person, that I'm going to hell, that like I'm trying to indoctrinate kids and like I need to leave the kids alone. And it was just horrible. And on the flip side of that though, I had a wonderful book launch last night. It was amazing. And I didn't even see these comments until after everything was over. So thank God it didn't like ruin my book launch, because that would have, I would not have been in the right state of mind to be like answering interview questions if I had seen that before. But yeah, so I was just very like upset when I saw it, and I asked some people to like report the trolls, and then I got like so much support and love from like my friends and even people that I don't know. And it was really amazing, and I feel so much better now. And like, even though like it was horrible and it shouldn't have happened in the first place, and that should never happen, like people shouldn't be accused of these things just because they're like writing queer YA. Like that's ridiculous. But it was really nice to see the outpouring of support that came after that, and how not everybody thinks that way, even though it seems like they do when they kind of just like open the floodgates. And yeah, I'm maybe I'm rambling a little bit, but it's been a wild ride. It's only been a day. And yeah, it's just been wild. And I didn't realize that these, you know, laws getting passed and all of this stuff about like the book banning and all don't say gay, like all of that. I knew it was going to affect my book, but I didn't think it would affect me personally. I knew it would affect my sales, but I didn't think that they would hurt my feelings, but they did. So like, yeah, it's just, I wish that it wasn't that way, and it's really hard to like even talk about, but I think it's really important to like for people to know that this is happening, and that this is what those like just allowing those dangerous conversations to happen, and those like dangerous like questions of like, should the kids even be reading about this LGBTQ stuff, like like, you know, it's just, it opens the doors for a lot of hate, and it sucks to have to like prepare for that, but it's really important to know. And now I know. So yeah, sorry that was probably a bit of a downer.
I feel like when you're opening up conversations about book challenges and political climates, there's a lot of downers. So it's not you. Like, there's going to be some downer moments. Marie, did you want to speak to that at all?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Senora, I am sorry that happened. And I just like, my heart says, just keep in mind all those young women who will just be so filled with joy to find your book and your story. And I hope they find it. That's what I want to say.
And everybody go and buy Sonora's book.
and I guess I'll also just say that I really appreciate what you said, Estelle. And I think that like one of the cool things about, for me, like watching young readers, I mean, schools are important places to find stories for sure. And I think it's really important that there be representation in school. I also think that like, I remember I was driving across the country last summer, and I was in this really small town in Iowa, and they had a little free book library, and I looked in there and I saw a pretty extraordinary range of books there, and thought like, some kid, I just loved imagining, some kid being able to walk up to that library and grab a world that the kid was not going to have access to. And I mean, I don't want to make stereotypes about what this town, it's not about this town, that could happen in any place, so just their capacity to come forward and find those stories and just what it means to them, it can be just profoundly transformative. So I just say, let's keep doing what we're doing. That's it for me.
And switching the topic just a little bit, because I know we do have writers in the audience, both from Jen's class, and also because we typically do at our YA events have some teen aspiring writers in the audience. Just kind of briefly, I guess, because we don't have that much time left, but like what's the one piece of advice you wish you had had when you decided you wanted to write a book? Jen, you want to start this one?
Sure. So my one piece of advice that I wish I had had was that someone had told me that it was really important to take care of my mental health so that I could be deeply resilient in an industry that says no to you a lot, and that actually, it turns out, affects you personally. Like, you create a product and you think like the product will be the thing that will be affected, but the industry affects you personally. So that's mine.
Carrie?
Oh boy, I was hoping you weren't going to come to me next. I thought that was great, Jen. That's so important. That's a really good, I wish I thought of that. But yeah, oof. Yeah, handling those rejections. I guess I'll speak a little bit to collaboration, and I will say that whether you're writing independently or and you know, like sharing with your writer friends for feedback, or working with a partner, which I did on this novel. For me, there is listen first and try to avoid getting defensive of your work. And I think it's important to be defensive of your work at times, but I think when you're getting feedback, the best thing, like, there's always something to be gleaned from it. And especially when you're collaborating with another person, if the person doesn't love it and you do, that's a problem. And you can, I know that I'm sure Maria might have experience with this too, but I always say, like, there is going to be a version that we both love. And I truly believe that, like, it means abandoning sometimes your own thing that you were holding on to and finding a third way and finding something that works for everybody. But I think that that can happen when you're taking your friend's feedback, when you're taking notes from your editor or your publisher. It can happen anywhere along the road. And so I say, go into it with an open mind, because stories will, like, wrinkle themselves out if you just let them have a chance. That's mine.
Senora?
The advice I would give to myself is that be prepared to do a lot of revision. Because I had no idea how much revision was going to go into that book. I revised it for over a year with my agent, and I wish I knew going in how much work it was going to need. So, yeah.
Actually, that gives me some relief, because hearing that you wrote it in 30 days, I was so jealous.
I actually wrote it, don't hate me, I wrote it in 16 days. But
I just don't
revision.
Okay.
I revised it for over a year, so
Okay.
it was a give and take.
Okay.
Estelle?
God, I had so many things going through my head, but I think what I would want to tell myself is not to be so serious and just to play and have a lot of fun, because so many discoveries can be made through being playful instead of kind of cinching in and making yourself all tight. And so I love side work, like writing scenes from different perspectives and writing out lists of what a family gathering would be like, or whatever, you know, those kinds of things that don't make it into a book, but that inform everything. I feel like Senora was talking about world building, like taking the time to, like, have a good time because there is so much just like gritting your teeth and sitting down when you don't feel like it, and just having to work through things that are really complex. And so have a good time when it's just you and your idea.
Oh, did we just lose Myra and Marie? Oh,
No,
no.
sorry. We've clearly been having some technical issues tonight. So my number one piece of advice for those budding writers, authors out there is, do not go to Goodreads. Goodreads is not for you. Goodreads is for people who want to set fire to books. So, and on a more craft level, You know, I always tell this when I give workshops or classes, like for me, there's three things, you know, passion, persistence, and preparation. Passion for whatever you're writing, whatever story you're telling, because you will have to revise this manuscript a million times. And I think we read Does My Body Offend You? I kid you not, probably the entire manuscript, probably close to 50 times. So if you are not in love with that work, those 50 reads are going to be really rough, and you're just going to lose that passion and that drive for the work. You know, persistence, because there's like the path to publication for 99% of people is littered with rejection. Of course, there are those one-offs that just get picked up off the first draft. We just met somebody in Atlanta that happened to, but that is super rare. My first manuscript was rejected by 200 literary agents. My manuscript that went out to submission, the first manuscript was also rejected. So it wasn't until the third manuscript that I wrote that it actually turned into a published, you know, book. And preparation, you know, you have to do the work of learning the craft, looking at craft books, attending a workshop, get yourself a critique partner or join a critique group and attend a conference. Like the more you know about the industry that you're trying to succeed in, and the genre that you're writing it, the more informed you are, the better you will be able to make decisions to advance your career.
I just say build community, you know, find people who also love to write. Surround yourself by people who are at every stage of that process, from just beginning to draft their very first short story to, you know, having 8 or 10 published works, and surround yourself with those people and be honest with them and create. I mean, you know, we as authors have to be vulnerable. And if you're going to be a vulnerable person, you have to have a community to ground yourself in. And, you know, Maida and I have been very fortunate in Atlanta to be able to build a community of writers at every stage of the process who are just open and honest and compassionate and loving with each other as we work through those hundreds of rejections, thousands maybe, at every step of the way, and celebrate together. And that's the other thing. Every single good thing that happens, celebrate it.
Yes.
Yeah, like don't start looking for the next thing, just stop and celebrate it. It is a beautiful thing. Every single good thing.
I mean, heck, just writing a book. How many people say they're going to write a book and they never do anything, right? If you've written anything, just pat yourself in the back. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening and for doing the work and being vulnerable on the page and writing these super important books that I know I, as a young adult, had a lot of questions about my identity and made some choices regarding my sexuality that maybe I wasn't so pleased with at the time, but I didn't really have literature to refer to help me like navigate that space. And I didn't necessarily have adults in my life I felt safe asking those questions of. So we are so proud to be able to represent your books to our teens in our community, and virtually to reach a larger audience, but also just super grateful that you guys were here to do this event with us to help us spread the word about them. So thank you so much. All of these books that we talked about this evening are currently in store attendees. So if you're not local, you can order them to be shipped. If you are local, you can stop in. We've got them on the shelves. I know we had a couple of orders come in right before the event started, so those will be processed in the morning. But they're there. And if you aren't local to us and you have a local independent bookstore, they're almost certainly available there. And if not, they will order them for you. And the way that we as booksellers learn what our community wants in literature is by people ordering books we don't have on our shelves. So we know that you guys want more of that. So authors, thank you so much for being here with us. Attendees, thanks for coming and learning about these books with us. And we hope you've got some great choices for your summer TBR piles now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great night.
Thanks.
Good night.